Again, muchas gracias. Well, I can't get the smile off of my face because I am totally stunned. I have done multiple interviews in every country, on every continent in the world, except anywhere in South America. And that this good-looking young man who does not speak English is wanting to interview me. So I'm beyond honored. So grazie. So tell me why he wants to interview me.
I will translate and tell you. Jhon dice que lo que estamos hablando, que él está sorprendido, que es un honor que, bueno, que un joven tan guapo como tú te entreviste, que él no ha hecho entrevistas en todos lados, bueno, en Sudamérica, y te hace una pregunta a ti, ¿por qué lo estás entrevistando?
Porque me he visto la mayoría de sus entrevistas. Es muy difícil conseguirlas todas en YouTube. Me he conseguido en tus canales de YouTube y en otras plataformas. He podido casi ver como el 60% de ellas.
Because Jhon has seen, not all, because there are a lot, but like a 60% of your interviews in YouTube and a lot of channels.
Oh my gosh. Well, a couple of things. First of all, has he read all those books behind him? He got those books. That's very impressive. Okay. Has he read?
I think that Jhon got like a great background, but I know that he has read a lot of books. I am the one with the books next to me, but I will ask Jhon, I will tell that. Jhon dice que te has leído todos los libros que están en el fondo. Yo le dije que pues era un fondo falso, pero que yo sé que tú lees bastantes libros.
El cine, lo que sea. Hay de todo, de todo. Por hoy.
Jhon, do you read English at all? Or do you have somebody who could read English to you? You just look so young.
I will ask him, but I think that he doesn't read English at all. And that's why I'm the translator, but I will ask if Jhon reads English at all. Jhon, que si tú has leído en inglés del todo o siempre alguien te ayuda con el inglés.
No, pues he intentado, pues con el input comprensible poder hacerlo con mi cuenta, pero estás también tú con el hecho de las traducciones en las entrevistas. Eso es lo que he estado experimentando, aprendiendo.
Jhon says that he's learning. He used software to translate, and also myself, Andres, I help him with the translations. So it's no problem.
Mi esposa es Sarita, es mexicana.
Oh,
muy bonita, mi esposa. So she will absolutely love this, as I am enjoying this too. So what is it that he would like to ask me about that compelled him to want to interview me? What does he want to talk to me about?
Bueno, Jhon, como tú viste, la esposa Sarita es mexicana, dice que está muy feliz. Y listo, que comiences con las preguntas. ¿Qué quieres preguntarle?
Por favor, bueno, yo quisiera preguntarle a Jhon, gracias por darme la oportunidad en poder hablarle sobre el guión que has realizado, el que tiene el fondo de atrás, sobre, bueno, todo lo que tiene que ver con John F. Kennedy, con todo lo que es toda esta industria. Pero quisiera preguntarte, más que todo, ¿cuál es el equilibrio de mantener la objetividad y expresar su crítica en esta historia, en esta investigación, en lo que ha hecho?
Jhon wants to ask us the first question. Tell us more about that script that you have written about the JFK assassination, the Jim Garrison tapes, but mostly for the balance between maintaining the objectivity and expressing the subjectivity in a movie or in a film critic.
Well, you know, I had the feeling that indeed the one thing that he wanted to talk to me about was the JFK assassination and Jim Garrison. So I will say, now, are you going to, will you be putting up a site? Because if I give you my site, your audience can go and watch the first Garrison tapes free on my site. So it is www.johnbarbour.com. And the first film that you can watch is called The Garrison Tapes. Now, I made The Garrison Tapes. It won the San Sebastian Film Festival Award in Spain. And when Oliver Stone was shooting the movie JFK, Jim Garrison was on his deathbed. And the one who was making the arrangements for Oliver to do the film, he had bought Jim Garrison's book on the Trail of the Assassins, paid the Garrison family $50,000. That became the foundation of the movie. Unfortunately, after the movie became a hit, the Garrison family had to sue Oliver Stone to get their money. But in any event, on the deathbed, Jim Garrison said to Elizabeth that he wanted to also do a documentary about her father. And she said, "No, Mr. Stone, my father only wants John Barbour to tell my story because Mr. Barbour lost the two best television shows in American history when he tried to tell my father's story." And the first time this happened was in 1970. I had the best morning show in Los Angeles. And I went into a bookstore and I accidentally picked up a book called Heritage of Stone. And the author was Jim Garrison. So I started to read it, and I read it in the bookstore. And I discovered things that were never in the American press or in American television, that Mr. Garrison had to sue Time Life to get the Zapruder film. And when they sent him the Zapruder film, it was so bad he couldn't show it to the jury. So a friend of mine, Steve Jaffe, went to Paris, where de Gaulle gave him a clear copy of the Zapruder film. Also, there was a forensic pathologist named Zink, who was called for a witness for Clay Shaw, who testified on cross-examination. There was no autopsy of John Kennedy, that it was prevented by a military man, probably Curtis LeMay. So after reading the book, the next day I called Mr. Garrison in New Orleans and asked him to be on the show. And he said, "Don't book me on the show. You're going to lose your job." And I said, "Listen, we just won an Emmy. We have the most popular morning show in North America." And I finally talked him into coming on the show. And the next day I was fired. Now, all of this is in that documentary. But the best documentary is the second one. Now, I don't mean to talk so long, so I will let Jhon ask me another question. You can translate all that, and I'm enjoying listening to you, by the way.
And I'm enjoying listening, and I will translate. Jhon, sé que lo que dijo fue amplio, trataré de resumir porque es muy importante. Dice que primero quiere que él no quiere dar, entiendes que este caso es muy complejo, ¿cierto? Y todo lo que se hablaba en él son versiones, ¿no? Dice que quiere que primero veas el primer documental que está en la página de internet de él, y tú sabes muy bien la historia detrás de eso. Lo que pasa es que Jhon en ese momento, tú sabes, había ya ganado un Emmy, tenía el mejor show mañanero
Varios
en
Emmys.
Los Ángeles. Sí, pero en ese momento, estamos hablando del momento en el que él compró el libro de Garrison, y resulta que él lo compró y lo leyó completo en la librería, y se quedó sorprendido pues, por los detalles que daba, ¿no? Que incluso en la autopsia de Kennedy había mucha vigilancia, por ejemplo, del ejército. Resulta que esos detalles, él le pidió, al conocer eso, él llamó a Jhon y le dijo, quiero que estés en mi show. Y él dijo, no, porque vas a perder tu programa. Eso aparece obviamente en el documental, la pérdida del programa, porque él perdió su trabajo en la televisión y todo. Al revelar eso, ocurrió algo fuerte, porque después de ver ese documental, Oliver Stone, que por cierto, ese documental le fue muy bien en San Sebastián. Resulta que Oliver Stone hizo la película, la de JFK, ¿tú sabes? Pero ocurrió algo muy fuerte, como una pelea legal entre Stone y Garrison. Resulta que él me pidió el favor de traducir porque quiere contarte lo que él para es la mejor versión, que es el segundo documental. Entonces
Wow.
voy a dejar que él hable.
Por favor,
Okay,
please.
please tell us more about the second documentary, the one that you told that is the best one.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to give you just a little background from me. I was born in the South Asian Army Charity Ward in Toronto in 1933. And my mother and father abandoned me. I was on the streets when I was 6. I came to the United States the first time when I was 17, and I was deported. I came a second time a few years later, and I was deported again. So a lot of Mexicans and a lot of South Americans can identify with me because I've been deported so much, right? But in 1977, I was awarded my citizenship by Senator John Tunney of California. So I was fired from my morning show in 1970, but in 1979, I created the most original and successful television show in American history. It was called Real People. And I was dubbed in America the godfather of reality television. We were getting 22,000 letters a week. I was making $1 million a year. Then by accident, I had forgotten all about Mr. Garrison because I have a family to feed. And, when I was fired, I just thought that was show business. I didn't think it was anything to do with the military or deep state or anything. It's just show business. You can't keep a job. Anyway, with Real People at its height, I read in the newspaper one day, not on the front page, but the back page, that the House Select Committee realized 4 shots had been fired in Dealey Plaza. So there had to be a conspiracy to murder the president. So I called Mr. Garrison. We would talk on the phone. We talked on the phone during the Vietnam War. And also, I was Frank Sinatra's private writer for 4.5 years. Does he know who Frank Sinatra is? Okay, so in 1979, when Frank Sinatra took over The Tonight Show, he invited me to come on as the first guest. I was a very successful comedian before I started doing all this. And somebody said, why is it that John Barbour, a comedian, is doing all this stuff with Mr. Garrison? And Mr. Garrison said that the Warren Report is the biggest joke ever played on Americans, and so it's suitable that a comedian should be talking about the Warren Report. That's how smart Jim Garrison is. Anyway, I decided, since I had the #1 show in the country, to tell the story of Mr. Garrison again, because he had been exonerated. One of the questions I asked him was how many shooters there were in Dealey Plaza, and he said there were 3 teams, probably 2 behind the grassy knoll and 1 at the Daltex building, but never in the book depository. And then I asked him, how many people in America did you think knew that John Kennedy would never come out of Dealey Plaza alive? And he said, well, John, it's a military operation. It's on a need-to-know basis. And my calculation would be 32, at most, 32. And then he named a bunch of them. I have those names. Anyway, when that episode was aired, a man named George Slaughter, who owned the show, who was friends with Nixon and the establishment, re-edited my tape so that when Mr. Garrison was asked, how many shooters do you think there were in Dallas? He had cut it to say Garrison saying 32 and made Garrison look like a crazy man. Then Slaughter called me on the phone gloating about the fact that he showed what a fool Garrison was. And I screamed at him. We didn't have cell phones at the time, but we had recording devices, and I recorded him. So I called Mr. Garrison, and I was sobbing. And I said, you could sue Garrison now and NBC, and you would own them. And Mr. Garrison said to me very quietly, he said, Jhon, if I sued everyone who libeled me, I would never see my family. I would never see my office. Just send me a few Real People t-shirts. And the next day, I was fired from the most successful television show in American history called Real People. So I will pause a bit while you translate to Jhon.
John nos da un pequeño como background. Sabes muy bien que él es canadiense. Él de hecho fue abandonado por su familia y después fue deportado, o sea, a muy temprana edad, pero después logró su ciudadanía estadounidense. Sabes muy bien que antes él era comediante, ¿cierto? Y
Sí.
cuando fue la entrevista de Sinatra, pues mucha gente decía, pero ¿cómo es posible pues, que este comediante ahorita esté haciendo estas entrevistas? Y pues que se hubiera dado la de Garrison, ¿no? La de Garrison. Hay algo que creo que es muy público, pero igual lo está dando a conocer acá, que la entrevista que le hizo a Garrison fue editada para hacerlo ver como un loco a Garrison. O sea, el dato que supuestamente él da de que hubo 32 personas que sabían que Kennedy iba a morir, fue un dato editado. O sea, simplemente tomaron una parte de la entrevista real donde él dijo 32 y lo tomaron. Obviamente en la entrevista real se dice que hubo 3 equipos, que unos que estaban ubicados en ciertas zonas, o sea, se habló de los que están ubicados en ciertas zonas, y se sabían que iban a estar, pero no el que estaban en el depósito de libros. Es un dato importante que obviamente se vio en la película. Y resulta que cuando hicieron quedar a Garrison como el loco, Jhon llamó llorando y dijo, mira, por favor, no, esto no puede quedar así impune, esto no, te están haciendo quedar como un loco. Es que Garrison le dijo, mira, tranquilo, simplemente regálame unas camisetas de tu programa, no hay problema. Por eso nunca pasó a mayores. Me pidió el favor de traducir, le digo que continúa hablando sobre, o que tienes alguna pregunta, sí, un documental, ¿no? I translate, and Jhon, continue talking if you wanna why the second documentary is the most important, or do you wanna answer another question from our friend John Jatenjor?
Well, the most important documentary ever made. Jim Garrison was the only law enforcement officer to investigate and solve the murder of John Kennedy, but was absolutely and totally sabotaged not only by all of the American establishment, which bullshit the people about nobody is above the law, because they all broke the law, and all the American media buried and destroyed Jim Garrison. Okay? That documentary is called The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It is only $2 on Amazon. Do you get Amazon in Colombia?
Yes, the streaming service and the page. So yes, of course.
Yes, okay, it's called The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy. You will see he absolutely solves the case. And at the end of the documentary, when I was with Mr. Garrison, I remember the date, September 5th, 1981. I interviewed him for 3.5 hours. But every once in a while, he would say, I don't want to speculate. Turn off your phones, turn off the camera, turn off the microphones. The word supposedly in America, the guy, Allen, the head of the CIA, Allen Dulles, was supposed to have been the one who crafted the assassination. but he is just an employee of the few families that own the country. And Jim Garrison gave me the name of the man who ordered Allen Dulles to murder John Kennedy. Okay? We have all of that information. And when I asked him if he were district attorney, who would he arrest? He gave me 3 names immediately: Lawrence Harvey and Fred Lee Christmas, Lawrence V. Myers. And it turns out that he was able to solve all of these simply by reading. He had 3 sets of the Warren Commission. Do you know that he believed the Warren Commission until he met Congressman, the only dissenting congressman, Hale Boggs, the only one on the Warren Commission who said Oswald didn't get it. But he was not allowed to print that in the Warren Report. And he disappeared in an airplane crash over Alaska. Nobody found his body, but he had a chance to call Garrison and say Oswald didn't do it. The Warren Report's 26 volumes. Mr. Garrison got 3 sets: a set in the car, a set in the office, and a set at home, and memorized it all and opened his investigation and solved it. Jim Garrison is more important to the United States than John Kennedy, Thomas Jefferson, or any president who ever lived. Because even John Kennedy and Thomas Jefferson would tell you no man should be above the law. But that doesn't hold true in America anymore. America is absolutely and totally finished. If you're under 30 years of age in this country, there's absolutely no free press. I'm going to tell you what a wonderful man Mr. Garrison is. Now, if you go to my site, I'm going to give you my site again, www.johnbarborsworld.com. On his deathbed, he made a 19-minute phone call to me before I left to go starting to shoot my documentary. It will break your heart and bring you to tears. Now, Jim Garrison, again, to show you what a magnificent man he was. He had 5 children, but he was surveyed 24 hours a day. The cops tried to entrap him with sexual stuff and all kinds of stuff. They were never successful. And all the pressure over 5 years destroyed his marriage. And his wife, Liz, divorced him. And when she was so lonely, and Jim gave her almost all his money, she married a guy who spent all the money. And she was literally broke. Now, Jim was not out of law enforcement because he ended up being the most popular judge elected to the bench in New Orleans. But when he was ready to die, he called his children together. His best friend was a minister, even though he was an atheist. His best friend was a minister. They used to talk big bands together. They used to talk Shakespeare together. And he told Elizabeth, you go get my friend, get a marriage certificate, and call your mother and come over by the house. So they did that, and the 5 children gathered, and Jim was wasting away on his deathbed. His wife comes in, and she says, why am I here? And he says, you're here because you're going to marry me. And she laughed, and she said, Jim, it didn't work out the first time, okay? I don't think I want to do that again. He said, well, listen, you won't have me hanging around so much this time. So I'm going to tell you something. I know what happened with you and your husband. You're having a tough time getting by. I have a great pension as a lawyer, and I'm not going to last another 6 months. But when I die, I want my widow and my wonderful wife and mother of my 5 great children to get my pension. And that's what they did, and that's what she lived on. And I can think of no other American ever in the history of this country as great and as important as Jim Garrison.
Jhon siente que Jim Garrison es la persona más importante que ha vivido en Estados Unidos, incluso más que el mismo Kennedy y que Thomas Jefferson, porque es el único que pensó que en realidad nadie está por encima de la ley. Dice que eso no se puede ver ahorita en Estados Unidos, incluso los jóvenes en Estados Unidos la están pasando mal porque a pesar de lo que muestran no hay libertad de prensa. Obviamente tú sabes muy bien que Jhon, un ejemplo de lo que es intentar hacer prensa libre. Jhon, acá no recuerdo nombres, pero diré algo que te aconsejo que lo busques en la página de internet, donde está no solo el documental, sino que son 3 horas, sino la última llamada que tuvo con Jim, que es súper conmovedora. Son 90 minutos, justo antes de que pues partiera este mundo. Dice que el último deseo de Jim fue que su esposa y su viuda recibiera la pensión, o sea, nunca se pensionó. Imagínate eso.
Oh,
Hay algún dato importante que te voy a dar, no daré el nombre, pero sí diré el hecho, para que la gente haga sus conclusiones. Dicen que siempre se quiso culpar a una persona de, de la CIA por el crimen de Kennedy, pero esa persona era un simple empleado. Dice bueno, no solo Jhon, sino Jim, que las familias más importantes de Estados Unidos fueron las que llevaron a tomar esa decisión y se la dejaron simplemente a ese simple empleado que estaba ahí.
oh.
Entonces esa es la razón por la que obviamente, pues, además de que fue marginado horriblemente, Jim, se le inventaron un montón de crímenes sexuales y un montón de cosas que pues con las que nunca pudieron culparlo, pero igual se destruyó todo. Yo sé que está haciendo cosas fuertes, por eso manejo esa discreción, pero todo está en el documental. ¿Alguna pregunta?
Bueno, tengo mi última pregunta para Jhon, que para cuál es hermoso que todo lo que estás diciendo, y es sobre que me hable sobre su experiencia con Tarnikovas, pero también sobre esta pregunta que él puede responder y nos dé la bendición a nosotros como periodistas en Colombia. ¿Qué desafíos enfrentamos nosotros los periodistas de cine al cubrir sobre películas que abordan temas sensibles o controvertidos?
Y le diré que se ve perfecto al lado del cuadro de Ernie, ¿no?
Exacto.
Okay, as a final, first, Jhon wants to acknowledge you are at the net side of the how do you say in English, of the portrait of Ernie Kovacs. So tell us more about that experience with him. But mostly the question is, as a final, Jhon and myself, we got this channel. What challenges we face of the journalists, the movie journalists, covering movies that deals with sensitive or subjects like the one from Jim Garrison and the one that you cover, because we know that you talk with directors and actors of movies that for those ages were controversial. So tell us more. What are the challenges that we face? And tell us about Ernie Kovacs.
Well, you can see on my site, www.johnbarbersworld.com, the second greatest documentary about anybody in show business is called Ernie Kovacs, Television's Original Genius. That is the first full-length documentary that I ever made. And I say it's the second best. It used to be the best, but the best was made about 8 years ago. And it was a documentary called Looking for Sugarman. All right, you remember that? It won
And he passed away. And he passed away this week. Yes. No,
Yeah.
Sugarman.
Yes, Sugarman. And you know what the word Sugarman means?
Hombre de azúcar. No, tell us.
It's the dope dealer, looking for the dope dealer. And it's
Yes.
it is a magnificent film. But I just want to get back to a couple of last words about Jim Garrison. Has John heard, I'm sure he has, of Mark Twain?
The writer. Yes, the writer Mark Twain.
Ask him.
I will ask Jhon because I know him. Jhon, te pregunta Jhon si tú has oído la obra del escritor Mark Twain. Yo la conozco, pero quiero saber si tú la conoces. Yo te voy a dar una
Depende.
pista. ¿Te acuerdas que hay un conteo de dos? I'm giving John
He's
like a
dead.
hint because I know he read him, but he doesn't remember. John, ¿te acuerdas el conteo de dos sobre la película de los niños que hablan con el diablo que se hizo en plastilina? Que es
Las
una de las más
aventuras de Tom
controversiales.
Sawyer.
Las aventuras de Don Sawyer. Yes, Tom Sawyer. Yes, John now knows about Mark Twain. I will
Okay.
remember.
Mark Twain is America's greatest writer, and he said a lot of the greatest things. And one of the greatest things he ever said, the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you discover why. Well, I didn't discover why until I was almost 30. I came to the United States at 17 illegally to be a gambler in Las Vegas, okay? And how did this orphan kid who wanted to be a gambler end up as one of the most popular and important people on television? If you go to my site and see all my work, there is no one in the United States in the history of television who's done the variety of work that I have done and have done as well. I was the first film critic in America on television. I have one of my reviews ruled on by the Supreme Court. That's also in a great book written by Carol Hennig called The Greatest Reviews That I Ever Read. But I didn't know what I wanted to do until I saw a talk show host by the name of Jack Barr. And he did the best interviews in America. But he opened his show doing a stand-up monologue, a comic. So I wanted to be like Jack Barr and talk to people. And so I learned how to be a comedian. And I became a very, very successful comedian. But I didn't quite become the next Jack Barr. But I became the first and best John Barbour. And I had to do a lot of the things I had to do just to feed my family. But I did them better than anybody else. Why I had that talent, I don't know. God-given or whatever. I have no idea about that. So I had lots of different things I had to do in television and on stage then, okay? But now I only have one ambition. I'm 90 years old, and I only have one ambition now. And that is it. John Kennedy's dead. The memory of John Kennedy is dead. Nobody in America has any interest. You know, it's a cold case at the Justice Department. I went to the Justice Department 5 years ago with the names of a dozen people who should be arrested today in America and tried. And there are only 2 left living right now. And I went with a wonderful man and lawyer named Brian Lloyd, who sadly died a couple of years ago, and I desperately miss him. So John Kennedy's over with. He's worm food now. But more important than John Kennedy is the memory of Jim Garrison, because he is the one who challenged the government and the media and showed the world how they lied to murder the president of the United States. And Jim Garrison said, until they solve that murder, no president will ever run the United States of America, which is definitely clear now. So my one ambition is I have spoken to 2 or 3 multimillionaires that I know about giving me $1 million to give to Tulane University to start a scholarship for Jim Garrison. Millionaires, it's petty cash to them. And you know what they say to me? In English, fuck off. Okay? So I am hoping that I can get 1 million people to look at my film, and all the people in this so-called community that is looking for truth. When none of them is looking for truth, they're only looking for sales for their fucking books and their fucking DVDs. They're all greedy. They're all it's despicable, because in my documentary, I recommend all their works, all their books, all their films. They never once mentioned mine. If they did, I could make $1 million of my own and send it to Tulane University and have a scholarship for Jim. Do you know that in New Orleans? Oh, yeah. In New Orleans, there is a monument to Carlo Gambino, who was one of the mafia bosses in New Orleans. Not one for Jim Garrison. Not one. The greatest, most important American who ever lived. He was as important as Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson. He was more important than anybody. He was an absolute true hero. And at one point, John, I asked him, he was in the military. He was at Dachau when they liberated the death camps in Germany. That's the only picture in his office that says, never again. He was unbelievable, just unbelievable. In any event, my last wish and last hope is that I'm able to sell enough DVDs that I myself can start a scholarship at Tulane University and Jim's name. It would be a scholarship for a deserving law student. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. It may happen after I'm gone. I hope so. Anyway, I must tell you, quite honestly, I don't understand a word you're saying, but I had more fun and I got more excited doing this interview, whose language I don't understand, than the hundreds of interviews I've ever done. It's just a unique thrill to me that somebody as young as you, talking to somebody as old as me about Jim Garrison, I find monumentally touching and monumentally moving. So, muchas gracias. I cannot thank you enough for what you have done.
De nada, you're welcome, and I will translate everything because I know that those words will touch Jhon. It touched me, but I want to Jhon feel moved. Jhon, espero te conmueva, pero diré todo, ¿no? Absolutamente todo. Dice con la mucha humildad que ese documental sobre Ernie Kovacs para él es el segundo mejor documental que existe sobre una biopic, porque para él el primero es Buscando a Sugarman, o sea, imagínate.
Uf.
O sea, él dice que sobre la pregunta que le hiciste, ¿no? Él dice que los retos siempre van a estar. De hecho, él incluso aparece en un libro, no recuerdo el autor, pero un libro de las mejores reseñas que se han hecho de cine, porque fue el primero en hacer reseñas de cine en su programa. Y que muchas de esas reseñas fueron incluso llevadas a juicios, o sea, por los temas que trataba. Porque, pues, obviamente, tú sabes, hay mucha censura y está hablando de películas. Tengo entendido que en la época que él las hizo, el cine estaba empezando a tener como una fractura. Había cine que no era, digamos, que le gustaba a los grandes partidos, por ejemplo. Bueno, y espero acordarme, sobre Jhon, pues él dice que el último deseo fue que incluso se hiciera como una especie de curso, por así decirlo, en la Universidad de Nueva Orleans, pues la que Nueva Orleans, sobre pues la vida de Jhon. Porque él dice que cómo es posible que incluso en Nueva Orleans hayan estatuas sobre mafiosos, jefes mafiosos, y no sobre Jhon, que para él es el ser humano más, el norteamericano más importante, que incluso él tenía una foto en su oficina. Jhon sirvió en las tropas, ¿no? Y una de las fotos que tenía fue la liberación de los campos de Auschwitz, y que él decía no más, o sea, así de ser humano importante era. Entonces resulta que cuando él fue a pedirle a los billonarios, por favor, donen algo, él decía que pues una porción para crear ese curso, pues ya sabes la respuesta que recibió, fueron insultos grandísimos. Él dice que siempre va a invitar a la gente que vea el documental, o sea, por favor, comparte la página, porque él dice que hay gente que lo ha usado y que incluso le ha dicho, no, mira, es que yo no me he basado solo en este libro, me he basado en estos libros, me he basado en estas películas, puedes verlas, y que la gente, o sea, solo busca, cada vez que habla del caso de Kennedy, siempre busca enriquecerse, vender, pues, como dices, putos DVDs, y que él le da mucha rabia a eso. Él entonces solo está pidiendo es que la gente vea la versión de él, que más que la versión de él es la versión pues, de Jhon. Espero haberlo dicho todo y te voy a decir algo, tienes todo el derecho a llorar. Él dice que le han hecho cientos de entrevistas y que él dice que no entiende ninguna palabra tuya, pero que dice que una persona como tú, joven, le esté preguntando sobre el caso de Jim Garrison en un país, pues obviamente, digamos con la edad que hay, y un país que pues como Colombia dice que una
Excuse,
entrevista más. She
excuse
told me, master.
excuse me. Could I just say the last few words? Because I heard you say the
Of
word
course.
Jim Garrison.
No, continúo.
Later on, when we get closer to November 22nd, which is its 60th anniversary, I would love to come back and talk to you again. If you have any fans that like to read, the very best book ever written about anybody in American show business is my autobiography with the title inspired by Jim Garrison. Do you see this, John? Look at this cover. It's Your Mother's Not a Virgin, the bumpy life and times of the Canadian dropout who changed the face of American television. It is an unbelievable read, also on Amazon. So, again, I cannot thank you enough for the joy and encouragement you've given me to know that people whose language I don't even speak could be so interested in Jim Garrison and John Kennedy. So to the both of you, oh yes, you must promise me you use all of this. Don't leave anything out. Don't leave the profanity out. Leave it all in. Send me the link. I will share it to my 5,000 friends and I'll give you the feedback because I love doing this. And there are a lot of people who speak Spanish who are my friends who will also love hearing it, especially my wife's family. So I say to the both of you, con todo mi corazón, vaya con Dios.
Nos bendijo.
Vaya con Dios, but I will translate because John needs to know what you tell him. So wait for it because I will tell. John, tienes que
Okay. This Jim Garrison tombstone reads, "Let justice be done, though the heavens fall." And my prayer in America, which to me is over with, is that the heavens fall on this very corrupt and greedy and inhuman system.
Shall be done, and I will translate. But I will translate. Don't go, please.
Okay, I won't go.
Because John needs to know. John, más palabras que con mucho gusto traduciré. John dice que, como te decía, para él esta entrevista en un lenguaje que no conoce es la que más lo ha llenado de emoción, más de,
Wow, thank
imagínate,
you.
con la sientas. Y John, lo bueno es que va a haber más John, porque él dice que nos necesita 26 de noviembre, por favor, anótalo, porque lanza su autobiografía, ese libro grande, hermoso que viste, con el mejor título que vi en mi vida, ese título lo dio Jim Garrison, por cierto, que dice algo así que tu madre no es una virgen, algo así. La historia del dropout es como que el escapado, del canadiense escapado que cambió la televisión. O sea, imagínate, o sea, todo. John dice que por favor no, y obviamente le dijimos que obviamente vamos a hacer eso, no censures nada, saca todo lo que dijimos acá, porque él se lo va a compartir a sus usuarios, incluso latinos, entonces que dice que por favor nada de censura, por favor que te pido, y en la tumba de Jhon dice que algo así como que la justicia caiga de los, que la justicia se haga, algo así. Él dice que lo quisiera cambiar como que el cielo caiga en contra de los corruptos de este sistema.
Wow.
Así que,
Yo quisiera decirle gracias, Jhon, por todo esto que has hecho, también por entrevistarme. No me di cuenta, pero me acabaste de entrevistar a mí y eso para mí es oro. Y yo quiero hacerte esta última pregunta. ¿Cómo defines su trabajo en una palabra?
Jhon is thanking you. Jhon said that also he thanks you because somehow you interview him because you answer bad, and that's an honor. And try to define yourself, your career in one word.
Again, muchas gracias.
De
Adiós.
nada.
Adiós.
Adiós. John.
No, la verdad, muchas gracias y ya nos bendijo, dijo que nos bendijo. Nos
You
bendijo.
bless us, man.
God bless you,
us,
man.
master.
Tú eres el
God
mejor.
bless
You are the best.
You are the best. Eres el mejor.
Thank you so much. John.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good week.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye, John. Thank you.
Bye bye.